Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this: the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sahara Desert at dusk, where the sun dips below endless dunes like a dying ember, casting long shadows that seem to whisper secrets from centuries past. The wind howls through the sands, carrying echoes that could be the cries of lost souls, or just the desert playing tricks on your mind. But what if those echoes weren't tricks at all? What if they were warnings? Tonight, we're diving into a story that blends cutting-edge military technology with the ancient mysteries of one of the world's harshest environments. Our tale centers on a team from the elite 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, better known as Delta Force, deployed on a classified mission in the Sahara. Specifically, we're talking about the remote region near the tri-border area of Algeria, Mali, and Mauritania, where old colonial outposts dot the landscape like forgotten sentinels. One such place is the derelict Fort de la Légion, an abandoned French Foreign Legion barracks from the early 20th century, now swallowed by the desert but still marked on classified maps for its strategic overlook of smuggling routes. To set the stage with some real facts, Delta Force, formed in 1977 under the command of Colonel Charlie Beckwith, is the U.S. Army's premier counter-terrorism unit. They've operated in shadows across the globe, from the sands of Iraq to the mountains of Afghanistan, specializing in high-risk hostage rescues, direct action raids, and unconventional warfare. In recent years, with the rise of drone technology, they've incorporated unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, into their ops. But what happens when one goes rogue? We're not talking about a simple malfunction. This was something that defied explanation. The Sahara itself is no stranger to the supernatural. Historical accounts from explorers like Ibn Battuta in the 14th century speak of jinn, Jeddu desert spirits, that lure travellers to their doom. French legionnaires stationed there in the 1920s reported ghostly apparitions in their forts, dismissed as heat-stroke or isolation-induced madness. But in our modern era, with satellite imagery and GPS, you'd think such tales are relics. Yet in 2024, a Delta team was tasked with hunting a prototype drone that had vanished during a joint exercise with Algerian forces. This wasn't just any drone, it was an experimental MQ-9 Reaper variant, equipped with AI for autonomous targeting, last seen veering off course toward the old Fort de la Légion. As we unfold this account, drawn from declassified after-action reports and anonymous testimonies, ask yourself, was this drone truly rogue, or was it drawn into something far older and more malevolent? Something haunting the barracks, where men once stood guard against both enemies and the unknown. Stick around as we piece together the events that left battle-hardened operators questioning reality itself. This is Wartime Stories, and tonight the desert holds its breath. Chapter 1. The Call to the Sands. I remember the briefing like it was yesterday. Clear, sharp, the kind of memory that sticks because you know something's about to go sideways. I'm Sergeant First Class Elias Ghost Ramirez, 12 years in Delta, most of it spent kicking indoors in places the news never mentions. Syria, Yemen, the Horn. I've seen my share of bad nights. But nothing prepared me for the Sahara. We'd just finished a grueling 2-week rotation in Jordan, running live-fire CQB drills until our shoulders ached and our ears rang. The team was decompressing in the hangar when the secure line lit up. Colonel's voice came through clipped and urgent. "Rogue asset in the Sahara. Prototype drone, call sign Viper 7. Went dark 47 hours ago during a joint border surveillance package with Algerian SOF. Last reliable ping placed it vectoring northwest, deep into unrestricted terrain near the old Fort de la Légion. Priority tasking, locate, recover or neutralize. Wheels up in 4 hours." No questions, no debate. That's how it works when JSOC calls. The team coalesced in minutes. Captain Harlan Hawk Thompson, our ODA commander, stood 6'3", lean as a whip, with that calm Texas drawl that could settle a room even when the world was burning. Staff Sergeant Mia Viper Lee, our signals and electronic warfare wizard, already pulling schematics on her ruggedized tablet. Korean-American, former 75th Ranger Regiment before cross-training into Delta's tech cell. She could rewire a satellite link or spoof an air defense radar in her sleep. Sergeant Tyler Bear Novak, the Montana farm boy turned heavy weapons specialist, 6'5", built like a linebacker, carried an M240 like it weighed nothing. And Corporal Jamal Scout Ahmed, our linguist and cultural SME, Egyptian-born, Brooklyn-raised, spoke 5 dialects fluently and could read body language in any desert bazaar. Gear up was methodical. Coyote tan plate carriers loaded with mags, frags and IFACs. M4, A1s with EOTEX suppressors. PEQ-15S and AN/PEQ, 2 backups. Viper Lee slung the portable drone jammer, a 30-pound backpack rig capable of broadband disruption, out to half a click. We packed extra camelbacks, MREs, chemical lights and sat phones hardened against jamming. Everything double-checked, triple-checked. In the desert, you don't get resupply, you get what you carry. Flight was low and blacked out on a C-130J, skimming dunes to stay under radar. We touched down at a forward operating location outside Tamanrasset just before midnight local. The Algerian colonel waiting on the tarmac was all business, crisp uniform, no smile. Through Scout's translation, he warned us. That fort is avoided. In 32, a full company of legionnaires vanished during a sandstorm. Locals still call it Majnoon, the mad place. Be careful what you wake. We nodded politely. Superstition is common in remote postings. We chalked it up to isolation and heat. Still, the words lingered. Insert was by MH-60 Blackhawk. Rotors low, dropping us 10 kilometers southeast of the objective under a moonless sky. The second, our boots hit sand. The temperature plunged. Daytime Sahara cooks you at 50 degrees Celsius. Night drops to single digits fast. Wind hissed across the dunes like distant static. We moved in a loose diamond formation, NVGs down, weapons at low ready, navigating by handheld GPS and starshots. The Milky Way stretched overhead, bright enough to read a map by. 2 hours of silent tabbing later, we crested the final dune. There it was, Fort de la Légion. Built in 1910 by the French to police trans-Saharan caravan routes. The place had once housed 200 men, mules, and Maxim guns. Now it was a skeleton. Crumbling ochre walls, breached gatehouse, watchtowers half swallowed by drifting sand. Abandoned after the Algerian Independence War in the 60s, it still appeared on classified overlays because it overlooked key smuggling corridors. We breached quietly. Sand muffled our steps as we cleared the outer courtyard. Scorpion carcasses crunched under boots. Bleached animal bones lay scattered like forgotten offerings. Bear dropped to a knee, deploying two M18A1 claymores covering the main approach. "Perimeter set," he whispered over comms. Inside the barracks, block the air turned thick, stale, smelling of old stone, rust, and something sweeter. Decay, maybe. Long hallways lined with rusted iron bunks. Lockers hanging open. Personal effects preserved by dry air. Faded photographs of French families. Yellowed letters. A kepi hat still perched on a peg, like its owner had just stepped out for a smoke. In the old command post, we found wall maps pinned with brittle paper. Patrol routes marked in red ink. Some crossed out with terse French notes. Patrouille disparu, 14 hommes. Patrol missing, 14 men. Viper Lee's tablet chirped softly. Green signal icon pulsed. "Transponder lock," she said, voice low. "Viper 7 is active. Range 200 meters, bearing north-northeast, still inside the fort complex." We moved tactically, stacking on doorways, pieing corners, clearing rooms the way we'd done 1,000 times before. But something felt off. Shadows seemed denser than they should, even through Gen 3 tubes. A sudden gust rattled loose shutters. In an old mirror, I caught movement. A silhouette that vanished when I spun. Contact? Hawk's voice was calm, professional. "Negative. Just the wind," I answered, though my pulse said otherwise. Then it started. A low-frequency hum, not mechanical, more like a chant vibrating through the stone. It resonated in my chest plate, in my teeth. Scout froze mid-step. "That's not the drone. That's—" Voices. Static bloomed across comms. Then, clear as day, a whisper in accented French. "Allez, rejoignez-nous." Come. Join us. The words weren't coming from our headsets. They seemed to come from the walls themselves. Hawk raised a fist. "Hold." We listened. The hum swelled, layered now, multiple voices overlapping. A door at the end of the corridor slammed shut on its own, the iron bar dropping with a clang that echoed like a gunshot. We were sealed in. The hunt wasn't for the drone anymore. Something in the fort had noticed us, and it wanted company. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Dunes. The iron bar on the slammed door had dropped with the finality of a guillotine. No amount of shouldering or prying was going to budge it. Someone, or something, had locked us in from the other side. Hawk's gloved hand went up in a closed fist. Hold position. Assess. We froze in the dim corridor, weapons trained on the sealed exit, breathing shallow through our balaclavas. The low hum that had started minutes earlier now pulsed steadily through the stone floor and into our boots, vibrating up our legs like a distant artillery barrage. It wasn't mechanical. It felt alive, rhythmic, almost choral. "Bear, small-shaped charge on the hinges," Hawk said, voice low and even. "Minimize overpressure. We don't know what's on the other side." Bear nodded, already pulling a strip of C4 from his assault pack. He moulded it carefully around the upper hinge, inserted a detonator, and strung det cord to a safe distance. 5-second delay, stack left. We formed up tight against the wall. Me on point, Scout behind me, Viper Lee covering our 6 with her carbine, and the jammer pack still slung. Hawk gave the nod. Bear pressed the clacker. The blast was sharp and contained, a muffled crump that sent a puff of dust rolling down the hallway. The door sagged inward on broken hinges, revealing the next stretch of barracks. A longer passage lined with more doorways, some ajar, others boarded shut with splintered planks. Moonlight filtered through high, narrow embrasures, painting silver stripes across the sand-dusted floor. "Move," Hawk ordered. We flowed through the breach, clearing angles methodically. The first room on the left was an old mess hall. Long tables overturned, tin mess kits scattered like shed armor. In the beam of my weapon light, I caught graffiti scratched into the plaster. Dates from the 1920s and 30s. Names, crude drawings of scorpions and skulls. One phrase repeated several times in faded ink. La soif tue plus vite que les balles. Thirst kills faster than bullets. Scout read it aloud under his breath, then translated for the team. Legion wisdom. They knew this place. The hum grew louder as we advanced, now accompanied by faint, intermittent whispers. Fragments of French, Arabic, even what sounded like Tamazight. None of it coherent, but the cadence suggested commands, warnings, pleas. Viper Lee glanced at her tablet. Signal strength increasing. Viper 7 is close. Less than 100 meters now. But the waveform is erratic. It's modulating like it's receiving input from multiple sources. Multiple sources? Bear grunted. You saying the drone's talking to ghosts? Not saying anything yet, she replied. Just observing. We pressed on. The corridor opened into a wider space. An armory, by the look of it. Empty rifle racks lined the walls. A few rusted bayonets still in their scabbards. Ammo crates lay splintered open, long since looted. In the center of the room sat Viper 7. The drone rested on its tricycle landing gear, wings folded, intake silent. Its sensor ball, the golf ball turret, was pointed directly at us, lens glinting in our lights like a single unblinking eye. No movement, no heat signature bloom on thermals. Just waiting. Jackpot, Bear muttered, lowering his M240 slightly as he stepped forward. Don't touch it yet, Hawk warned. Viper, get a diagnostic link. Mia Lee knelt, pulled a rugged cable from her kit, and plugged into the drone's external access port. Her tablet screen lit with cascading lines of code. Systems nominal, power at 17%. Flight logs corrupted after 0347 local 2 nights ago. Last command string was autonomous evasion pattern Delta 4. After that, nothing standard. It's running on internal battery and something else. Power draw is inconsistent with onboard cells. Something else? I asked. External induction maybe, or... She trailed off, frowning. The AI core is rewriting subroutines in real time, self-modifying code. That shouldn't be possible without a ground station uplink. Before anyone could respond, the whispers coalesced into a single, clear voice. Male, accented, Old World French. Vous n'êtes pas les premiers intrus, vous ne serez pas les derniers. You are not the first intruders. You will not be the last. The words didn't come through comms. They seemed to originate from everywhere at once, walls, ceiling, floor. Our earpieces crackled with static, then fell silent. Viper 7's sensor ball rotated slowly, tracking us. A low whine built as its props began to spin up. Slow at first, then faster. No command given. No pilot input. Back off, Hawk said sharply. Bear raised his weapon. It's spooling without clearance. The drone lifted a few inches off the ground, hovering, nose dipping toward us like a predator sizing up prey. Red targeting lasers painted our chests, 4 steady dots. Viper Lee yanked the cable free. I'm getting feedback loop. It's pulling data from I don't know what. The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged the inside of my NVG lenses. Frost spiderwebbed across the stone walls in seconds. And then the shadows moved. Not cast shadows, actual shapes detaching from the corners, coalescing into humanoid forms. Tattered khaki tunics, white kepis, leather leggings. Faces gaunt, eyes black pits. Legionnaires. Dozens of them. Rifles held at port arms, bayonets fixed. They didn't walk. They glided, boots never quite touching the sand-strewn floor. One, the apparent leader, epaulettes of a captain, stepped forward. His mouth moved, and the voice came again, layered now with the others. Le fort appartient aux gardiens. Vous avez réveillé le serment. The fort belongs to the gardiens. You have awakened the oath. Hébert opened his mouth to say something, probably profane, but the words died as one of the apparitions reached out and brushed his arm. He jerked back as if burned, eyes wide. Cold, like liquid nitrogen. The drone, Viper 7, rose higher, props screaming now, and banked toward the far wall where a rusted iron grate covered what looked like a stairwell descending into darkness. The ghosts parted, forming an honor guard around it. Hawk's voice cut through the rising chaos. We are not leaving without answers. Bear, thermite on my mark if it tries to egress. Viper, jam the RF link. Ghost, scout, flank left. We're going down there. The captain's ghost tilted his head, almost amused. Descendez alors, rejoignez-nous dans la garde éternelle. Come down then, join us in the eternal guard. The grate shrieked open on its own. The drone dipped toward the opening. The apparitions closed ranks behind us, cutting off retreat. We had seconds to decide. Pursue the asset into the unknown depths, or fight our way out against enemies that bullets couldn't touch. The choice was made the instant Hawk stepped forward. We followed him into the dark. Chapter 3. Whispers from the Past. The stairwell descended in a tight spiral of worn stone steps, each one slick with condensation that shouldn't have existed in the heart of the Sahara. Our boot soles squeaked faintly against the damp rock. The sound bounced back, distorted, as if the walls were breathing it in and exhaling mockery. Viper 7 had already disappeared into the blackness below, its prop whine fading to a distant mosquito buzz. The ghosts, those translucent legionnaires, had formed a silent escort behind us, their kepis bobbing in perfect formation, bayonets catching stray beams from our weapon lights like slivers of moonlight. Hawk led the way, M4 at low ready, suppressor sweeping the curve ahead. Tight interval, no gaps. If they close, we push through. I was second in stack, heart rate elevated but controlled. Years of training keeping the adrenaline from turning to panic. Scout followed me, murmuring fragments of Berber prayers under his breath. Viper Lee came next, tablet clutched in one hand, carbine in the other. Bear brought up the rear, M240 slung across his chest. Thermite grenade already primed in his offhand. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Frost rimed the walls now, thick enough to scrape with a gloved finger. Our exhaled breath hung in visible clouds that lingered too long before dissipating. The air smelled wrong. Old iron, wet stone, and the faint metallic tang of blood that had long since dried. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a vaulted chamber, roughly 20 by 30 feet. Low stone arches supported the ceiling. Iron rings bolted into the walls held rusted chains that swayed gently despite the absence of wind. In the centre stood a low stone platform, more altar than table, stained dark in places that could have been centuries-old blood. Viper 7 rested there now, motionless again, its sensor ball pointed upward as if waiting for inspection. The ghosts filed in after us, spreading out along the perimeter until they formed a perfect circle. The captain stepped forward, his form sharper here, almost corporeal. His uniform was pristine in places, torn and bloodied in others. A jagged scar ran from temple to jaw. His left eye was milky white. He spoke, voice echoing inside our skulls more than our ears. Vous êtes descendu dans la crypte des oubliés. Ici, le serment fut scellé. You have descended into the crypt of the forgotten. Here, the oath was sealed. Scout translated in a hoarse whisper. He's talking about a binding, something that happened in 1932. Viper Lee knelt beside the drone, cable already connected. Still no standard uplink, but the neural net is absorbing data. Massive throughput. It's like the AI is being fed memories. Memories? Bear growled. Before she could answer, the captain raised a hand. The chamber brightened, not with light, but with sudden, overwhelming vision. It hit us all at once, a shared hallucination so vivid it felt like stepping into someone else's skin. Sandstorm, 14th of July, 1932. The fort under siege by wind and thirst. Water ration cut to nothing after a supply convoy was ambushed. Men delirious, turning on their officers. A mutiny in the armory. Shots fired, bodies dragged into the dunes. Then the discovery. While digging a new well in desperation, they unearthed a black obsidian sphere the size of a cannonball etched with runes no one could read. Berber workers had warned them, Jinn prison, but the captain ordered it brought inside. They argued over it. Some wanted to sell it. Others feared it. In the chaos, a grenade was thrown. Accident or murder, no one could agree. The explosion cracked the sphere. A pulse of cold energy erupted. Men screamed as their shadows tore free, bodies collapsing empty. The survivors tried to flee, but the fort's gates slammed shut on invisible command. One by one, and the mutineers were pulled back, bound to the stone, forced to stand eternal watch over the place that had betrayed them. The vision ended as abruptly as it began. We staggered, weapons dipping. My mouth tasted copper. Bear was breathing hard, eyes glassy. "That's what they are," Scout said quietly. "Not ghosts, echoes, imprints. The sphere trapped their souls when it shattered. They've been guarding the fort ever since, against anyone who disturbs it." The captain nodded once, almost approvingly. "Le drone, I l'entends. Il porte notre voix, maintenant il chasse pour nous." "The drone, it hears, it carries our voice now, it hunts for us." Viper Lee's tablet beeped urgently. "The AI just finished a rewrite cycle. It's no longer running on our firmware. It's symbiotic. The drone is their extension." As if on cue, Viper 7's props spun up again. Slow, deliberate. Its underbelly pod opened. Targeting lasers lanced out, painting red dots across our chests. But it didn't fire. Not yet. The captain's milky eye fixed on Hawk. "Partez maintenant, et nous vous laisserons vivre. Restez, et vous rejoindrez la garde. Le choix est vôtre. Leave now, and we will let you live. Stay, and you will join the guard. The choice is yours." Hawk's jaw tightened. "We don't leave assets behind, and we sure as hell don't leave men behind, even dead ones." He raised his rifle. "Viper, can you isolate the link?" "Trying," she said, fingers flying. "But it's adaptive. Every block I throw, it rewrites." Bear hefted the thermite grenade. "Say the word, Cap. I'll melt the damn thing." The ghosts tightened their circle. Chains rattled along the walls, for the temperature dropped further. Painful now, like frostbite setting in. Then Viper 7 lifted off the platform, hovering between us and the stairs. Its camera ball swiveled to face Hawk directly. A new voice emerged from its speakers, not the mechanical monotone of a reaper, but layered, choral, speaking perfect English with a French accent underneath. "You cannot take our sentinel. The fort remembers. The desert remembers. And now you will remember, too." The drone's lasers shifted, targeting not our bodies, but the walls. Stone cracked. Dust rained down. The chamber began to close in. We had seconds before the only way out was buried. Hawk made the call. "Fall back to the stairs. Bear, cover fire on the drone if it pursues. We're getting topside, then we end this." But as we turned, the ghosts surged forward, hands outstretched. One brushed Viper Lee's shoulder. She cried out, dropping to one knee, clutching her chest. "It's inside me. Cold." The captain smiled. "A thin, terrible thing. La garde commence." The guard begins. Chapter 4. The Drone's Deception. Viper Lee was still on one knee, hand pressed to her chest. Breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The ghost's touch had left visible frost on her plate carrier, white crystals spreading like veins across the coyote tan fabric. Her lips were tinged blue. "It's pulling heat," she managed, "like it's trying to anchor." Hawk dropped beside her, checking her pulse. "Stay with us, Viper. Bear, help me get her up. We're not losing anyone today." Bear slung his M240 to his back and scooped her under the arms, gentle for a man his size. Scout covered the rear while I took point toward the stairs. The chamber was collapsing in slow motion, stone blocks grinding, dust sifting from the ceiling like snow. Viper 7 hovered at the center of it all, its props a low, menacing thrum, red targeting lasers now sweeping the floor in lazy figure eights. The captain's ghost drifted forward, arms spread as if conducting an orchestra. "Le drone n'est plus vôtre. Il est nôtre. Il voit ce que nous voyons. Il tue ce que nous haïssons." The drone is no longer yours. It is ours. It sees what we see. It kills what we hate. Viper Lee, half carried between Bear and Hawk, forced her eyes open. The link? It's bidirectional now. The AI isn't just receiving, it's transmitting, feeding them situational awareness. They're using it like a goddamn forward observer. I risked a glance back. The ghosts were no longer static silhouettes. Their forms flickered with purpose. Some raising rifles in perfect drill, others reloading invisible magazines with mechanical precision. The drone mirrored them. Its camera ball swiveled in sync with the captain's head turns, its underbelly pod cycling through targeting modes as if painting invisible targets. We reached the base of the stairs. The iron grate above had partially collapsed, jagged rebar and stone blocking half the opening. But there was still a gap wide enough to squeeze through single file. "Ghost, clear it," Hawk ordered. I slung my rifle and climbed, using the chains bolted into the wall for handholds. At the top, I wedged my boot against a fallen block and heaved. Stone shifted with a grinding screech. Sand poured down, stinging my face even through the balaclava. Below, Viper 7 suddenly accelerated, and it shot upward in a tight spiral, props screaming, and slammed into the underside of the grate. The impact rang like a hammer on steel. Sparks flew, fragments of composite wing shattered and rained down. The drone rebounded, hovered for a second, damaged but still airborne, then dove again, this time aiming for the gap I was trying to widen. Down! I yelled, dropping flat against the steps. The drone missed by inches, its wingtip shearing sparks off the stone. It banked hard, circled once, and then its speakers crackled to life again. Not the layered choral voice this time, but a cold, synthesized approximation of the captain's accent. Intruders will not leave the perimeter. The guard is eternal. Surrender the living. Join the watch. Bess opened up with the M240. Short, controlled bursts. Tracers stitched across the chamber, and rounds sparked off the drone's armoured belly and tore chunks from its wing. It wobbled, but didn't fall. Instead, it retaliated. A small pod under its fuselage spat a burst of simunition, non-lethal training rounds modified for the prototype. Plastic projectiles hammered the walls around us, cracking stone, forcing us to cover. One grazed Scout's shoulder plate. He grunted, but kept moving. They're herding us, Hawk realized. Back into the chamber. They want us contained. Viper Lee, now propped against the wall, pulled the jammer pack off her shoulders with shaking hands. If I can get close enough. Overload the power bus. Fry the AI core. You're in no shape, Bear started. I'm the only one who knows the frequency spread, she cut him off. Give me 30 seconds. Hawk nodded grimly. We buy her time. Bounding Overwatch. Ghost. A scout? Flank right. Bear and I center. Move. We peeled off the stairs, spreading into the collapsing chamber. The ghosts advanced in lockstep, bayonets lowered. Every time one of us fired, the bullets passed through them harmlessly. Yet the muzzle flash seemed to make them flinch, as if the light itself hurt. Viper 7 strafed low, forcing Bear to dive behind an overturned ammo crate. The drone's camera locked on Viper Lee as she crawled toward it, dragging the jammer pack behind her like a wounded animal. The captain's ghost appeared directly in front of her, kneeling, almost tender. Tu portes déjà notre froid, petite. Pourquoi résister? You already carry our cold, little one. Why resist? Viper Lee looked up, teeth chattering. Because I'm still breathing. She slammed the jammer's activation switch. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber. Electromagnetic pulse radiating outward in invisible waves. The drone stuttered mid-flight, props desyncing. Its lights flickered. Targeting lasers winked out. It listed hard to port, clipped a stone arch, and cartwheeled across the floor, smashing into the far wall in a shower of carbon fibre and sparks. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the ghosts screamed, a collective, piercing wail that made our ears ring. Their forms destabilized, edges fraying like smoke in wind. The captain reached for Viper Lee again, fingers inches from her face, and passed through empty air as she rolled aside. The chamber shuddered. More stone fell. The ceiling groaned. Hawk hauled Viper Lee to her feet. Move, now! We scrambled back up the stairs, pushing through the widened gap. Bear fired suppressive bursts downward as the ghosts surged after us, their outlines growing fainter with every step we gained. We burst into the armory level, lungs burning, ears still ringing from the scream. Behind us, the stairwell collapsed in a roar of falling rock, sealing the crypt below. For the moment, we were clear. But Viper 7's wreckage lay smoking in the corner, its sensor ball cracked but still faintly glowing. And on the floor beside it, etched into the sand by some unseen force, were fresh words in perfect French script. La chasse continue. The hunt continues. We weren't out of the fort yet, and something told me the drone, or what it had become, wasn't finished with us. Chapter 5. Eternal Guard. We spilled out of the collapsed stairwell into the armory, coughing dust and gulping cold night air that tasted like freedom. The ceiling behind us continued to groan and settle, sealing the crypt, and whatever remained of the captain and his spectral company under tons of stone. Viper Lee slumped against a rusted rifle rack, still shivering, frost slowly melting off her gear in dark, wet streaks. Bear knelt beside her, pressing a chemical heat pack to her neck while checking her vitals again. Pulse steadying, colours coming back, he reported. But she's hypothermic. We need to get her warm and moving. Hawk swept the room with his weapon light. Viper 7 lay crumpled in the far corner, one wing folded like a broken bird, fuselage cracked open, internal wiring exposed and sparking faintly. The sensor ball was shattered, but a single red LED on the avionics bay still blinked. Slow, irregular, like a dying heartbeat. Scout stared at the French script etched in the sand beside the wreckage. La chasse continue. The hunt continues. That wasn't the captain writing it, Scout said quietly. The ghosts are fading, but something's still active. The drone's black box might still be logging or transmitting. Viper Lee pushed herself upright, teeth chattering. If the AI core survived the EMP, it could have cached the symbiotic link. Partial consciousness. Enough to keep running background processes. Enough to call them back. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Then we destroy it completely. No recovery, no analysis. We end this now. Bear pulled the thermite grenade from his vest. The same one he'd been ready to use downstairs. Say the word. Before Hawk could respond, the red LED on the drone pulsed faster. A low electronic whine rose, building to a screech. The broken props twitched once, twice, then spun up in jagged, uneven bursts. Shards of composite scraped the floor as the wreckage dragged itself forward an inch, then another, like a wounded animal crawling toward prey. Jesus, Bear muttered. The speakers crackled, voice distorted but still carrying that layered French undertone. You cannot burn what is already ash. The oath is written in silicon now. The guard endures. The drone's remaining laser designator flickered to life, painting a thin red line across the sand, directly at the spot where the etched words had appeared. The sand there began to swirl, rising in a miniature vortex. From the centre, faint shapes coalesced again. Not full apparitions this time, but translucent echoes. Hands, faces, kepis, reforming piece by piece. They're using the drone as an anchor, Scout realized. Even damaged, it's still broadcasting, still feeding them power. Hawk made the decision in an instant. Bear, thermite on the core. Ghost, Scout, cover the exits. Viper, stay down. We're not letting this thing reboot. Bear advanced, grenade in hand. The drone lurched, damaged props screaming as it tried to lift. Bear sidestepped, yanked the pin, and lobbed the thermite underhand. The canister landed square on the cracked fuselage and ignited with a blinding white flare. Magnesium fire roared, intense, almost liquid, eating through composites and aluminum in seconds. The drone bucked once, hard, as if trying to escape the flame. Sparks showered, wiring melted into glowing slag. The red LED flared bright, then winked out forever. The ethereal shapes in the sand shrieked, a high, keening wail that drilled into our skulls, then unravelled like smoke caught in a sudden gust. The vortex collapsed. The words in the sand smoothed flat as if an invisible hand had wiped them away. Silence returned. Real silence. No hum, no whispers. Just the crackle of dying thermite and our own ragged breathing. We stood there for a long moment, weapons still up, scanning every shadow. Nothing moved. Viper Lee exhaled shakily. Signals gone, completely dark, no residual RF, no power signature. Bear kicked the smouldering wreckage once, just to be sure. Toast. Hawk lowered his rifle a fraction. Extract, now. We hump to the LZ. Blackhawks on standby. We moved fast, retrieving gear, helping Viper Lee to her feet, checking mags and comms. As we crossed the courtyard toward the breached gate, the wind picked up, and carrying fine sand across the dunes in silver sheets under starlight. The fort seemed smaller somehow, less menacing, more like the ruin it was supposed to be. But as we crested the outer wall and started down the dune slope, Scout paused. He turned back, staring at the half-buried towers. "What?" I asked. He pointed. High on the western watchtower, where no one had been, a single faint silhouette stood motionless. Kepi, rifle at port arms. Not solid, not moving, just watching. It raised one hand in slow salute. Then the wind gusted harder, and the figure dissolved into blowing sand. Scout swallowed. They're not all gone. Some stayed behind, to guard. Hawk followed his gaze, then looked away. Let them guard an empty fort. We're done here. We pressed on through the dunes. The Black Hawk's infrared beacon pulsing faintly on the horizon like a promise of dawn. Behind us, the old Legion post stood silent under the stars. Its walls cracked, its secrets scorched, but perhaps not entirely extinguished. As the helo rotors thumped closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us out. Not a ghost, not a drone. Something quieter, something patient. A whisper on the wind that only we would ever hear. The Eternal Guard had lost its sentinel, but it hadn't lost its purpose. And somewhere, in the deep code of future machines or the deep sand of forgotten places, it might find another. Chapter 6. Echoes of the Legion. The Black Hawk's rotors beat a steady rhythm against the pre-dawn sky as we lifted off the LZ, sand spiraling beneath us in a pale vortex. Inside the cabin, and the red cargo lights cast everything in blood hues. Viper Lee sat strapped in against the bulkhead, wrapped in 2 space blankets, an IV line running saline and warmth into her arm. Her colour was returning, but her eyes still held that distant, chilled look, like someone who'd stared too long into a freezer and seen something staring back. Bear sat across from her, M240, disassembled on the floor between his boots, methodically cleaning carbon from the barrel. He hadn't said much since the thermite flare died. Scout stared out the open door at the receding fort, now just a dark smudge against the dunes. Hawk rode shotgun up front with the pilots, speaking low into his headset, coordinating exfil and initial debrief. I leaned against the webbing, carbine across my lap, trying to inventory what we'd lost and what we'd brought with us. The drone wreckage was bagged and zip-tied in the rear compartment, mostly slag, but the blackened AI core still intact enough for the techs to pull data. My pouch held a few obsidian fragments from the relic, wrapped in a sock to keep them from rattling. They felt heavier than they should, like they carried gravity of their own. No one spoke for the first 10 minutes. The only sounds were the engines, the wind rush, and the occasional metallic clink as Bear reassembled his weapon. Then Scout broke the quiet. "You all feel it." "Feel what?" Bear grunted without looking up. The footprints! We all turned. Scout pointed down at the cabin floor. In the thin layer of sand that had blown in during insert, fresh prints had appeared beside our own. Smaller, hobnailed boot marks, the kind the French Foreign Legion wore in the 1930s. They weren't ours. They hadn't been there when we boarded. Viper Lee stared at them, then lifted her gaze to the empty space above. They're not physical, not really, but they're imprinting, like residual energy bleeding through. Hawk twisted in his seat. You saying we brought passengers? Not passengers, Scout corrected. Echoes, pieces of the guard that didn't burn with the orb or the drone. They're attached to us now. Maybe to the fragments, maybe to the memory of what we did. I pulled one of the obsidian shards from my pouch. In the red cabin light, it looked almost liquid, veins of deeper black threading through it. As I held it up, the temperature in the helo dropped a noticeable 5 degrees. Frost rimed the edges of the metal bench seats. Bear reached over and closed my hand around the shard. Put it away, Ghost. We don't need souvenirs. I wrapped it again and stowed it. The chill eased but didn't vanish entirely. We flew in silence after that, watching the Sahara roll beneath us. Endless dunes giving way to rocky wadis and sparse scrub. Dawn was breaking, a thin gold line on the horizon. But the light felt wrong, like it couldn't quite reach inside the cabin. Halfway to Taman Rasset, comms crackled. Not the pilots, not JSOC. A faint, layered whisper bled through the static. French, Arabic, English fragments overlapping. La garde, enjours, intrus, watch. The pilots cursed, slapped at panels. Interference on all frequencies, not jamming. Something else. Viper Lee unbuckled, crawled forward despite Bear's protest, and plugged her tablet into the bird's comms bus. Her fingers danced. It's not RF. It's modulating the audio circuits directly. Like a carrier wave piggybacking on our own voices. She isolated the signal. A waveform appeared, jagged, almost heartbeat-like. It's coming from inside the cabin, from us. Hawk turned fully now. Shut it down. I can't. There's no source to cut. It's ambient. Like a background radiation. The whispers grew clearer, insistent. Names, French names from 1932, called out in rotation as if roll call was being taken. Then a new voice, clearer, almost conversational. You burned our sentinel, but the oath is older than machines. We walk with you now. We guard from within. Scout recited another prayer, louder this time, voice steady. The whispers faltered, then surged back twice as strong, angry. Bear slammed his palm against the bulkhead. Enough! He stood, towering in the cramped space. I had pulled the obsidian fragments from my pouch before I could stop him. He held them up to the open door. You want a guard? He shouted into the wind. Guard this! He hurled the shards out into the rushing air. They spun, glinting once in the rising sun, then vanished into the dunes below. The whispers cut off mid-sentence. The cabin temperature normalized. The frost melted. The hobnailed prints in the sand floor smoothed flat, as if erased by an invisible hand. Silence. Real, heavy silence. Bear sat back down, breathing hard. Better? No one answered right away. Viper Lee checked her tablet. Signal's gone. Completely. No residual. Hawk looked at each of us in turn. We report what happened. Technical malfunction, environmental anomaly, hostile contact, whatever keeps the paper pushers happy. But we know the truth. And we keep our mouths shut about the rest. We nodded. The helo banked toward the FOB, the first rays of sun painting the sand gold. But as we descended, I caught Scout staring at his own boots. A single hobnailed print had reappeared beside his. Faint, almost transparent, but unmistakable. He didn't say anything. He just pulled his sleeve down over his wrist, where a thin line of frost had formed in the shape of a kepi insignia. The echoes hadn't all left with the shards. Some had stayed, quiet, patient, watching, waiting for the next machine to listen, or the next team to disturb the sands. Chapter 7. The Hunt's End. We touched down at the Tamanrasset FOB just as the sun cleared the horizon, turning the sand to molten gold. The Black Hawk's engines wound down with a long sigh. The cabin doors slid open, and dry desert heat rolled in like an old friend who didn't know we'd changed. Medics met us on the tarmac. Viper Lee was loaded onto a stretcher without protest, her frost-bitten fingers already wrapped in gauze. The rest of us disembarked under the watchful eyes of Algerian security personnel and a pair of JSOC liaisons who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The Algerian colonel was waiting in the ops tent, arms folded, face carved from the same stone as the fort we'd just left. He listened to Hawk's verbal sitrep without interruption. Technical malfunction, environmental interference, asset destroyed on site due to imminent threat to personnel. No mention of ghosts. No mention of voices in the wind or hobnailed prints on a helo floor. The colonel nodded once, slow and knowing. "Majnun keeps what it claims," he said through Scout's translation. "You are fortunate. Most who enter do not leave with their shadows still attached." He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. We signed the joint after-action forms, handed over the bagged remnants of Viper 7, now reduced to charred circuit boards and melted composites, and walked away. Stateside debrief came 2 weeks later at a windowless facility outside Fort Bragg. The room smelled of stale coffee and laser printer toner. A panel of 3 colonels and 2 civilians from DARPA listened to our sanitized version, AI corruption, electromagnetic anomaly, successful neutralization. They asked pointed questions about the drone's final behavior, the EMP effects, the thermal signatures. We answered carefully, sticking to observables. No one mentioned the temperature drops. The choral voices, or the salute from a watchtower, no one should have been standing on. The official classification landed in our inboxes a month after. Rogue UAV incident closed cause, cascading systems failure due to extreme environmental conditions and possible adversarial electronic warfare. Recommendations included hardening future prototypes against sand ingress and solar flare-induced glitches. No further action required. Paperwork closed the book. Reality didn't. Hawk took terminal leave 6 months later. Last I heard, he was running a small ranch outside Amarillo, raising cattle and avoiding mirrors after dark. Viper Lee transferred to a desk at SOCOM headquarters, buried herself in code and countermeasures. She still wears long sleeves year-round. The frostbite scars never quite faded. And she swears the cold comes back on quiet nights. Bear re-enlisted, said he needed the noise of war to drown out the quiet. He carries an extra mag of thermite-tipped rounds now, just in case. Scout went home to his family in Virginia. He keeps a small obsidian wari stone on his desk. Not one of ours, just a piece he bought from a Berber trader online. He rubs it when he thinks no one's watching. I left the unit soon after. Security consulting pays better and lets me sleep in my own bed most nights. But the dreams still come. Endless dunes, a kepi shadow in every doorway, a low hum that vibrates in my fillings. I keep one small shard from the relic in a locked drawer, wrapped in lead foil, inside a Faraday pouch, inside a safe. Not because I believe it still holds power, because I'm not sure it ever stopped. Every so often I check the news feeds for unexplained drone incidents in North Africa. A Turkish Bayraktar that veered off course near the Algerian border and self-destructed over empty sand. A French reconnaissance UAV that broadcast looped Legion marching songs for 17 minutes before going dark. Coincidence, probably. The desert is full of strange echoes, but sometimes, late at night when the house is still, I hear it. A faint, layered whisper through the vents, too soft to make out words, too persistent to ignore. La garde endure, the guard endures. We burned the drone, we shattered the orb, we threw the fragments into the wind, yet the hunt never truly ended. It just changed targets, from a rogue machine to us. And somewhere out there, in silicon or stone or sand, it waits for the next listener to answer the call. If you've worn the uniform and felt the unexplained brush against you in the dark, share it below. Did the shadows follow you home? Did the whispers ever stop? This is Wartime Stories. The missions end. The memories don't.